I think hospitalized for bronchitis. Then it took a turn for the worse. Whenever you hear pneumonia in someone his age, what does that tell you?
It's obviously concerning. I mean, pneumonia is always concerning in someone of advanced age, and his late 80s, even more concerning. And keep in mind, as you look at this timeline, that the Pope has had a significant history of lung problems going back to, even childhood or a young adulthood, when he had part of a lung removed for an infection at that point. Before February 14th, when he was hospitalized, we already got some indication that there were issues because he was having aides. His aides give talks for him, for example. He was having a hard time catching his breath well enough to do that, probably more upper respiratory at that point. But then by Valentine's Day, lower respiratory bronchitis. That's the sort of deep cough, that people will get. That's usually bronchitis. Then pneumonia a few days later. As you point out, slight improvement overall in his condition, but it's still pretty worrisome.
Yeah, because we already know that part of his lung, one of his lungs, has been removed years and years and years ago. What can you tell us about? He had an asthma attack as well, correct?
Yeah, so so people have a general understanding what asthma is. You think about it, exercise-induced asthma or cold-induced asthma. It's an inflammation of the airways that causes spasm of the airways. So just think about those airways. Normally you got air going in, air going out. They start to spasm like this as a result of an asthma, or in this case an asthmatic crisis. Typically that spasm's actually worse as you're exhaling, even more so than inhaling. But all of that basically, first of all, is very uncomfortable, but makes it harder for you to actually exchange air in your lungs. So that's concerning. On top of pneumonia, which already is this infection of the lungs, now you get the asthmatic crisis on top of that. And I think that's what really had people worried in particular over the weekend. You can give medications to sort of decrease that spasm of those airways, and you also give more oxygen. And you're familiar with these nasal cannulas. You see the two prongs that go inside the nose. You can give high flow oxygen through those nasal cannulas, 60 liters of oxygen. It's so much oxygen so quickly that you have to warm that oxygen, you have to humidify that oxygen because it can be very drying. So it's quite, it can really accomplish a lot, but that's what he's required as well. Dealing with the pneumonia, dealing with the asthmatic crisis, giving high flow oxygen, again, in the wake of someone who has part of their lung removed and is, in his late 80s.
Why did he have a blood transfusion? What was that for?
There's two things there, and this is an important thing because you think lung infection, what does that have to do with blood transfusion? So there's two things. First of all, if you give red blood cells are what carry oxygen throughout the body. So the more red blood cells you can have, you want to make sure that level does not drop. That improves the opportunity to transport oxygen throughout the body. But there was something else as well, and that is something known as platelets. Platelets are another blood component responsible for your clotting. People's platelets may sometimes drop as an early indication that they're starting to develop a more widespread infection. Platelets start to get consumed in the body. So no one is saying that the Pope has sepsis, which is a sort of body-wide infection, but that is the concern. Sarah, that is the big concern here. Obviously the pneumonia, which is what they call polymicrobial, many different organisms sort of causing that pneumonia, but the idea that it could spread into the blood and spread into the rest of the body is the concern. And so you look for clues. Are the platelets dropping? Are there other indications of that? And you try and get on top of it as quickly as possible. So that's certainly something the doctors are going to be monitoring, and if we get more information about that, we'll bring it to you as well.